She got pulled off a flight for looking suspicious, so she pulled $4 billion out of their pockets. You ever have one of those mornings where everything just clicks? Where your coffee's brewed exactly right, traffic clears up just in time, and even the TSA line at the airport moves quicker than usual? That was the kind of morning Dr. Monique Ellison was having. It was 6:43 a.m. in Terminal A of Salt Lake City International. Monique, sharp in a navy pantsuit and low heels, rolled her slim carry-on through the concourse like she owned the ground beneath her feet. Her assistant, Taylor, had already texted the final agenda for her Geneva meeting. The car that picked her up at 5:10 had been on time to the second, and the barista at the corner coffee stand remembered her name. Not Dr. Ellison, just Monique, just how she liked it. This wasn't just another business trip. This was the trip, the one that marked the start of a $4 billion partnership between Viridian Systems, her tech company, and the airline's global parent firm. A long time coming. 2 years of negotiations, revisions, compliance audits. Monique had led the entire process with the kind of precision most execs only pretend to have. She wasn't born into this. There was no trust fund, no elite Ivy League handouts, just grit, code, and patience. From community college to Stanford, from server rooms to boardrooms. And now, after all that, she was headed to Switzerland to sign the final agreement in person. The airline had even sent her a customized welcome kit with their logo and her name embossed in silver. First class, direct flight, window seat. She reached the gate early. Always did. The terminal was unusually quiet, almost too clean. Outside, the tall windows, the Utah sunrise glazed the tarmac in soft orange. Flight attendants stood off to the side, chatting casually. The boarding group hadn't been called yet. Everything was calm. She took a seat, pulled out her iPad, and glanced at the Viridian dashboard. Numbers looked solid. Engagement up, downtime low. Shareholders were going to be very happy by Q3. And then... "Excuse me, ma'am?" 2 men. Security, one older, built like he hadn't missed a lunch in years. The other younger, stiffer, wearing mirrored shades indoors. "Yes?" Monique looked up, polite, alert. She lowered the volume on her earbuds. "We need to speak with you. Step over here, please." She blinked. "About what?" "This won't take long." No explanation, no badge shown, no names. Just that cold tone that demanded compliance without context. Monique looked down at her boarding pass. Her full name was there, seat 2A, flight 519 to Geneva. She had nothing to hide. She stood up, keeping her voice steady. "I'm flying business for a company meeting overseas. I'm the CEO of Viridian Systems. You must be mistaking me for someone else." But the older guard was already motioning toward a side hallway near the gate podium. "No mistake, ma'am. Just a few questions. Won't take long." She paused. People were watching now. A middle-aged couple, a college student in sweats, even one of the flight attendants. Faces frozen in quiet judgment, heads slightly tilted, lips parted like they were about to whisper. Her heart thudded once, then again, a little louder the second time. Still, she followed. Not because she trusted them, not even because she felt safe, but because she knew what refusing could look like. But as she walked down that narrow hallway, every step brought more questions and not a single answer. The hallway they led her into was narrow and dull, with overhead lights that flickered slightly, just enough to notice. The kind of space that felt like it wasn't meant to be seen by the public, like it hadn't been cleaned since last fiscal year. Monique stopped walking. "Can someone please tell me what this is about?" The older security guy looked at his partner. The younger one leaned against the wall, arms crossed, saying nothing. Finally, the older one cleared his throat and said, "We received a report. Passenger matching your description. Suspicious behavior. Had to follow up." Monique frowned. Suspicious behavior? What does that even mean? No details, just a tip through the airline's internal reporting line. We're required to investigate. She raised an eyebrow. "Did this report say anything I should know? Something I did, supposedly?" The older guard shrugged. "Didn't say. Could be nothing." Monique let out a breath through her nose, trying to stay composed. "Then why was I pulled aside and not spoken to like a normal person at the gate?" No response. She glanced around. "Am I being detained?" Again, nothing. She pulled out her phone and began typing. "Ma'am, we'll have to ask you not to use your phone during this. I'm texting my attorney. You're holding me without cause before an international flight. You think I'm not going to document this? The younger guard finally spoke. Ma'am, we're just trying to keep people safe. She turned to face him directly. Are you keeping people safe, or just reacting to a phone call from someone uncomfortable seeing a black woman in first class? That hung in the air. No one answered. For the next 15 minutes, they asked the same questions, over and over. Where are you traveling to? What's your reason for travel? Do you have any checked bags? What company are you with? Every time she answered, the same pause followed, like they were waiting for her to trip up, say something different, give them a reason. She kept her answers sharp and consistent. Geneva. Business meeting. No checked bags. Viridian Systems. I'm the CEO. The younger one scribbled something in a small notebook, never once looking her in the eyes. The older guard seemed like he didn't even want to be there. At one point, he muttered, "Could be a false alarm." She looked at him. "Then let me go. My flight's boarding." He sighed. "We'll clear it up soon." But by the time they finally walked her back to the gate, the screen above had already changed. Final boarding. Gate closed, flight 5117 was gone. Monique stood in front of the window and watched as the plane slowly backed away from the terminal. The same plane she was supposed to be on. The same plane she'd planned her whole week around. The same plane that had a seat with her name on it. Her hands were cold, not from fear, but from pure disbelief. "I'd like a written explanation of why I was removed," she said flatly. The older guard scratched his head. "Ma'am, we don't usually do that unless there's an incident report. And technically, I want names, yours, his, and the name of whoever filed that anonymous report." The younger one tensed. "That's confidential, ma'am." She nodded, biting the inside of her cheek. "So you can detain me for almost an hour based on nothing, cost me a flight worth over 5 figures, and then walk away like it didn't happen." "You're free to rebook," the younger guard offered. "The airline may cover part of it." She didn't respond, just stared at him. A beat passed. Then she picked up her carry-on, phone still in hand, and walked away. Not a single person stopped her, but she could still feel them watching. But what no one knew, not those guards, not the passengers, not even the airline, was who Monique really was, and what she'd do next. Monique sat at a small table in a cafe just past security, not because she needed coffee, not because she had time to kill, but because she needed a second to breathe. Her fingers hovered over her phone. She wasn't sure who to call first, her chief legal officer or the chairman of Viridian's board. Instead, she called Taylor. "Hey," her assistant answered on the second ring, chipper as always. "You land early, or—" "I didn't get on the plane." A pause. "What? Why? What happened?" Monique lowered her voice. "Security pulled me out of line. Said someone reported me as suspicious. Didn't explain who, didn't explain what. Questioned me for almost 45 minutes. Taylor went silent. "I missed the flight," Monique added. I'm sorry, I don't even know what to say. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Monique said, but she wasn't. Her shoulders ached from the tension. Her heart hadn't slowed since the moment they asked her to step over here. Taylor asked, "Do you want me to alert the Swiss team, delay the signing?" "Not yet. I need to make some decisions first." After they hung up, Monique just sat there for a few moments, staring at the foam clinging to the side of her untouched coffee. Her mind kept going back to the faces in the terminal, all those strangers watching but not saying anything. No one asked questions. No one stood up. And those 2 guards. Neither one had asked if she needed anything. No apology, no explanation, just business as usual. She took out her iPad again, not to check emails, but to open the shared drive where Viridian kept its active projects. One of them was labeled Project Atlas. That was the code name for the $4 billion partnership, cloud storage, AI infrastructure, enterprise tools, a decade-long deal. And now, all she could think about was what it would look like to walk into the boardroom next week and say, "Pull it." She closed the iPad. As she exited the cafe, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call, private number. She let it go to voicemail, but it rang again. Same number, she answered. "This is Monique. Dr. Ellison?" The voice was crisp, male, mid-40s maybe. "This is Alan Rusk. I'm one of the directors at Northern Air." Northern Air, the airline that operated her missed flight. The same company her team had spent months negotiating contracts with. We were informed there was an incident this morning involving security, he said. I just wanted to personally reach out and assure you that we're investigating the situation thoroughly. Monique didn't respond immediately. He continued, Our preliminary report says it was based on a passenger tip. No profiling was intended, of course. It was a precaution. A precaution, she repeated flatly. Yes, and again, we regret the inconvenience. She could hear the discomfort in his voice. This wasn't a man used to being challenged. Inconvenience? She said, her voice dropping. You think this was about inconvenience? Dr. Ellison, I was humiliated, pulled from the gate like a threat. No details, no apology. And I missed a meeting with international investors because of your team's precaution. He went quiet for a moment. I understand your frustration, he said, though it didn't sound like he really did. We're committed to making this right. If there's anything we can do, there is. She took a breath. Be ready for a formal notice from Viridian Systems. Excuse me? She was already walking away. Next time your security decides to treat a black woman in a suit like a security risk, make sure you know who she is first. But what Ellen didn't know, and what Monique was just beginning to realize herself, was that this wasn't going to be a private correction. It was about to become public, loud, and very, very expensive. Monique didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even tell her driver what happened. She sat in the back of the black SUV as it pulled away from Salt Lake City International, silent, her arms folded across her chest. Her mind kept looping through every second of the past 2 hours like a reel that wouldn't stop spinning. She wasn't embarrassed. She was angry. The kind of anger that didn't rush. It simmered, heavy, focused. By the time she stepped into her condo in Scottsdale that evening, the Arizona sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the floor-to-ceiling windows. She placed her bag by the door, kicked off her shoes, and walked into the kitchen without turning on the lights. Her phone buzzed. A text from Taylor. Let me know if you want me to draft anything for the exec team, or just talk. I'm here. She stared at the screen, then another ping. This time, a text from Leandra Cho, Viridian's general counsel. I heard. I'm furious. Whatever you want to do, I'm backing you. Say the word. Monique dropped her phone on the counter and opened the fridge. She poured herself a glass of water and stood there staring into space. The silence in her home felt louder than the interrogation room. She thought about how easy it would be to say nothing. Let it pass. Brush it off. Protect the business. Keep the contract. Do what's always been done. But then she remembered the look on that younger guard's face, blank. Like she didn't matter. Like she didn't belong there in that first-class seat. Her board was expecting her in Geneva. Instead, she was now facing the kind of crossroads most leaders avoid at all costs. Principles versus profit. She grabbed her phone and typed a message. Leandra, can we get the board together for an emergency session? I want to talk before Monday, and I want this documented. Everything. Every interaction. Every conversation. She hit send. Then she walked over to her home office, flipped on the light, and sat at her desk. Her laptop powered up with a low hum. She opened a blank document and typed the subject line, Northern Air Incident, personal statement from Dr. Monique Ellison. Her fingers paused over the keyboard. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about the next Monique, the one who would be asked to step over here because someone decided she looked like a problem instead of a person, because people in suits still get pulled aside if they don't look like what someone expects. She began typing. The words came slowly at first, then faster. I am not writing this as a CEO. I'm writing this as a black woman who spent her entire life building something no one ever handed her. But Monique knew this statement wasn't the end of the story. It was the spark that would light the boardroom on fire. Monday, 9:02 a.m., Viridian Systems HQ. Third floor, East Conference Room. 12 board members filled the long glass table. Some joined remotely on the wall screen. The room was sleek. Matte black accents, touchscreen panels, frosted windows that turned opaque with a tap. But no one was looking at the design. All eyes were on Monique. She stood at the head of the table. No notes, no teleprompter, just her and her voice. She cleared her throat. I'll be direct. On Friday, I was pulled from a flight by security based on an anonymous tip that I was behaving suspiciously. No detail, no cause, I answered every question, cooperated fully, and I still missed our Geneva signing. There was a ripple of murmurs across the table. A few leaned back, others leaned forward. One of the older board members, Jerome Park from the audit committee, frowned. "Did they give you any justification?" he asked. "They didn't have one. There never was one. I wasn't searched. I wasn't accused. I was just stopped, because I looked like someone who didn't belong in seat 2A. Silence, a heavy one. Leandra, the general counsel, slid a folder toward the middle of the table. "We already pulled their public statement. It's vague. No mention of race, no direct apology, just regret for the inconvenience and a promise to review internal procedures." "Corporate whitewash," Monique said bluntly. "Well," said Julia Lynn, head of international strategy, "what exactly are you proposing?" Monique didn't flinch. "We terminate the agreement, all of it. Viridian pulls out of Project Atlas. We take the loss, send a message." A beat. "That's $4 billion, someone muttered. $4 billion. Monique stepped closer to the table. "You think I don't know that? I built this company from the ground up. I remember when we were fighting for 50,000. But if we go through with this partnership now, after what happened to me, what does that say to our people? To every employee who's been profiled in an airport or followed in a store or sat through HR diversity training that never changed anything?" A pause. She let it hang there. "This isn't about revenge," she said. "It's about respect. I refuse to shake hands with a company that lets this slide. I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm asking you to stand with me." The room went quiet. Finally, Jerome leaned forward, arms folded. "I've been on this board 8 years. I've never seen you come in here asking for anything like this. So I'm going to trust that you're serious and that you're willing to weather what comes with it." "I am," Monique said. He looked around the room. "Then I vote yes." Julia followed. "Yes." Then came another and another. By the end of the call-in votes, the result was unanimous. 12 out of 12. Viridian was out. The room didn't erupt in applause. It didn't have to. It was the kind of decision that carried its own weight, and everyone felt it. As the meeting broke up, Leandra caught Monique by the door. "You sure about this?" she asked. Monique nodded. "Dead sure. You just turned a private insult into a corporate earthquake." Monique looked over her shoulder, voice low but steady. "Good." But the world hadn't heard the story yet, and once they did, everything was going to change. It took less than 36 hours for the story to explode. Viridian issued a formal press release. Viridian Systems terminates strategic alliance with Northern Air parent company following CEO's discriminatory detainment. By noon, it was picked up by Forbes, then TechCrunch, then CNBC. The phrasing was careful, but the message was sharp. And then someone leaked the internal memo, the one Monique had written herself. "I was pulled aside not because of a threat, but because of a perception. A perception that someone like me, black, successful, and unbothered, couldn't possibly be a CEO. If my existence makes people uncomfortable, they can stay uncomfortable." That line hit social media like a match to dry grass. Pulled. While black trended within hours, Northern Air's stock dropped 6% in a single day. The airline scrambled. Their PR team issued a follow-up apology that sounded like it had been written by a room full of lawyers on speakerphone. "We regret the misunderstanding and deeply value diversity." Monique didn't respond. She didn't have to. The world had already chosen sides. Cable news ran back-to-back segments on racial profiling in airports. Morning shows invited experts to debate whether she had overreacted. Twitter was a war zone. Some praised her bravery. Others called it woke nonsense and threatened to boycott Viridian's products, despite not knowing what they even sold. Employees across the tech sector started sharing their own stories. Not all public. Some were anonymous. All of them were raw. I was pulled for random screening 3 times on the same connection. I watched a TSA agent ask my black coworker for ID after waving me through with nothing. First class makes people uncomfortable when you don't fit the mold. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a reckoning. Back at Viridian, the legal department worked overtime to untangle contracts. The finance team braced for shareholder calls, but something unexpected happened. Investors didn't flee. They leaned in. One major stakeholder told the Wall Street Journal, "The leadership Monique Ellison showed walking away from that kind of money to defend principle, is exactly why we invest in Viridian. And in the middle of it all, Monique kept her head down. She didn't schedule interviews. She didn't tweet. She didn't go on TV. She went back to work. In the break room one afternoon, a junior engineer named Celia from the UX team stopped her by the coffee machine. "Dr. Ellison," she said, half nervous. Monique turned. "Yeah?" I saw everything, online, the press, what you did. I just wanted to say thank you." Monique smiled, tired but sincere. "You're welcome. I've never seen anyone in your position actually do something about it." Monique nodded. "That's the difference between a seat at the table and owning the damn table." Celia blinked, smiled, and walked off. Monique poured her coffee, black, no sugar. She took a sip and stared out the window. The storm hadn't passed, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was just weathering it. She had caused it, but she still hadn't told the whole truth, and that moment was coming fast. The interview wasn't scheduled, it wasn't prepped, it wasn't polished, it just happened. A local Phoenix reporter had reached out to Monique's office repeatedly, emails, voicemails, even a handwritten note dropped off at Viridian HQ. Her name was Samira Hall, mid-30s, smart, persistent, and respected. And unlike the cable news circuits begging for a soundbite, Samira didn't want a gotcha headline. She wanted a conversation, so Monique agreed. The interview took place in Viridian's rooftop lounge, late evening, golden light flooding in through tall glass panels. No stage, no makeup, just 2 chairs and a camera. Samira leaned forward, voice calm but direct. "Why now? Why make this public?" Monique paused before answering. "Because if I didn't speak up, nothing would have changed. I've spent 20 years in this industry, in rooms where I was the only one who looked like me, in board meetings where my name was confused with someone else's. And still, I played the game. I followed the rules. I built the business. And none of that mattered when I got pulled off a flight for being suspicious." Samira nodded slowly. "Some people say this could have been handled quietly." Monique's lips curved slightly. Not a smile, not quite. "Of course they do. Quiet is comfortable. Quiet doesn't upset investors. Quiet keeps the doors closed and the money moving. But the people who look like me, we don't get the luxury of quiet." Samira asked, "Do you think the airline will change anything because of this?" "I don't know," Monique admitted. "Maybe they'll hire new consultants, issue a revised policy, launch a campaign. But that's not the point." "What is the point?" Monique looked straight into the camera. "The point is, I don't have to explain myself to be treated with dignity. I don't need to be famous or wealthy or highly educated to be respected at the gate. I need to be a person. That should have been enough." A long pause followed. Samira let it sit there, no rush to fill the silence. Then softly, "Do you regret walking away from the deal?" Monique leaned back. "I regret missing the flight. I regret not being in that room when the ink dried. But the deal? No. I built this company to make smart tech, not to excuse bad behavior. $4 billion can't buy back your dignity." Samira looked down at her notes, then back up. "One last question," she said. "What would you say to the woman watching this right now who's afraid to speak up, afraid to risk what she's worked for?" Monique didn't hesitate. "I'd tell her, you were never meant to play small to make others feel big. If the table shakes when you speak, maybe it wasn't built for you in the first place." The camera clicked off. The producer gave a thumbs up. Samira reached across and shook Monique's hand. "No one's going to forget this," she said. "I hope not," Monique replied. She walked out of the lounge into the warm Arizona night. The air was still, but her steps were lighter than they'd been in days. But before she disappeared into the evening, Monique had one more thing to say, one more truth to share with the world. Monique sat alone in her home office, the same one where she had typed that first statement. The headlines had slowed, the noise had faded, the deals lost, the shares regained. But something deeper had shifted. Within her, within the company, and maybe even beyond that. She opened her laptop and began writing again. This time, it wasn't a memo, it was a message. Not for the board, not for her employees, not even for the press. It was for anyone who had ever been mistaken for less, anyone who had been watched for walking too confidently, anyone who had been asked, "Can I help you?" in a place they belonged. She clicked publish on Veridian's official site. It read, "You don't need a billion-dollar contract to defend your dignity. You don't need a boardroom title to demand better. You don't need permission to be respected. If the rules change when you show up, maybe the rules were wrong. Stand firm anyway." And below that, "Speak, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's risky, especially then. No hashtags, no logo, just truth. The kind that doesn't trend, but stays." And for the first time in weeks, Monique closed the laptop with a sense of peace. Not because the fight was over, but because she hadn't stayed silent. Because she didn't let their discomfort shrink her value. Because someone, somewhere, would read those words and realize they weren't alone. She stood up, walked to her window, and looked out over the Scottsdale skyline. The world kept moving, and so would she. If you've ever been judged before you were heard, or stopped before you had a chance to speak, this story is for you. If you've ever been asked to stay quiet for the sake of keeping peace, let Monique's story remind you, peace built on silence isn't peace, it's control. Don't shrink, don't wait. Tell your story, stand your ground. And if you ever get pulled off your path, walk back on it stronger than before.